2.
What's going on, fellow park enthusiasts? This is the Park Geeks here. We got Daniel, we got Kurt, and today we also have a very special guest. We actually have someone who has had a hand in building a bunch of other rides that have been here all throughout Florida. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to the Park Geeks cast, Tim Bernardi. Tim, thanks you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's really, I've been wanting to have a chat with you guys for a while, and I like to support the effort, certainly.
All right, so why don't you actually get us started here by telling us a little bit about your work and what you've done within the industry.
Well, I'll take you back a little further than that, actually, Justin. The first time I ever went to a theme park was in 1969 when I went to Disneyland with my family out in California. I've been fascinated ever since. My family kind of caught the bug there. 1973, we were living in Chicago, and 1973 was our first trip to the Magic Kingdom. And then in 1974, we made a return trip, this time staying at the Polynesian Village Resort. My father often brags about the fact that his per-day room rate at the Polynesian Village in 1974 was $22 a night. I think he might still have that invoice someplace. Right now, you can't get the correct time at the Polynesian for $22. We all know that. Right. But that was a great adventure. And then back in 1980, the summer of 1980, I made a return trip to Disneyland. And I really did like the parks. It was quite a romantic thing. The Disney parks were. So when I was at the University of Kentucky, I jumped on an opportunity in the fall of 1982 and joined what was the Magic Kingdom College program, the MKCP, which is now the Walt Disney World College program. I was in the fall semester of 82, which meant my class was there for the opening of Epcot, which was a fantastic experience to actually be at a major theme park when it first opened. We went to our first cast preview nights actually in early September of 1982, so I visited the park before it actually opened to the public. I went back to the University of Kentucky where I was going to school, going from partying in Florida in the fall to cold January University of Kentucky. I was moving back to Florida by the following May.
Yeah.
I'll bet.
I did work for Disney for a little while longer than that. Also spent some time working at Universal Studios because I was staying in the hospitality industry, but I was job jumping. And at Universal Studios, I was an operator on Confrontation. So I did many, many rides on Confrontation back in that day. Then in the year 1998, on kind of a whim, I went over to Universal Studios and applied for a job. At the time, I was into desktop publishing, which meant my skill sets included kind of those fundamentals of computer operation. And I got tested on computers. That got me a contract working with Universal Creative. Starting in parks development, we were in charge of building the parking garages and some of the roads. And then from there, I shifted over to work on the closeout team for City Walk. And then in November 1998, one of the best experiences I've ever had, I joined the team that was building Men in Black Alien Attack. And I was on MIB from the point where it was a vacant lot till the grand opening day when Will Smith and Rip Torn showed up, and they had all the explosions and the helicopters and the rappelling and all that stuff. But nice. Men in Black was just an exceptional experience. And I threw myself into it. Even though I was an hourly employee and only being paid 8 hours a day, I would work 11, 12. I would come in on weekends just to watch this ride develop.
I'll bet.
After that, pardon? Go ahead, Justin.
I was going to say, I'll bet, because I don't think people realize just how exciting something like this is, because in a way, you're building a stage that's complete, made with sets that you can walk through, and that's part of the fun.
Yeah, seeing it go from just metal, from going to, again, from a vacant lot all the way up, was exceptionally cool. It was just a great experience, and I had people working on the creative side. The creative director, David Cobb, became a pretty good buddy of mine, and there was so much to do on the creative side. He would toss me these bones to contribute to, and that was a lot of fun. Continuing through the resume, and I'll talk more about Men in Black if you have questions. Continuing through the resume, in 2001, I went to work down the street at Walt Disney Imagineering. I was at Walt Disney Imagineering for about a year and a half. I was on the team that built the big wizard hat that was at Disney Hollywood Studios. changed over the Epcot icon over the top of Spaceship Earth. Actually walked the scaffolding above Spaceship Earth more than one time. And worked on One Man's Dream, the Walt Disney exhibit. 2004, back to Universal, where I worked on Revenge of the Mummy, which was kind of a return home because it was built in the Confrontation
Yeah,
building
one of my favorite
where we
rides.
did that. Yeah. So I went on worked on Revenge of the Mummy for a while. And then after that, I went to work for a subcontractor, and that subcontractor has since built all kinds of stuff. Between November 2017 and January 2020, we ran 27 construction sites on Disney property on different projects, everything from renovations of hotel rooms to brand new attractions. And that was also it's an exceptional experience. Being surrounded by incredibly talented and brilliant people working for the two theme park operators as well as other great contractors, and just seeing how things kind of unfold and develop. It's been a fun career, especially for a guy who fell in love with theme parks in 1969.
Yeah, Kurt, you've been to Disneyland in its heyday, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I can't remember. I was too young to remember the first visit. I think it had to be like 67. I think my first visit to the park. So I know that very clearly because I know it was before the moon landing, which was 69. But yeah, I got an opportunity to go a couple times in the 60s. Not so much in the 70s because I was in school, but then starting in the 80s, I got to go again a lot. Then through the 90s, through a lot because I was in California in the 90s. So it says 5 hours down the road now.
Yeah, and I'm sure Kurt will say the same thing. It's interesting to see the way the parks have not only evolved in terms of the addition of new attractions, restaurants, and other types of design things, but also from the culture, from the atmosphere, and dealing with the challenges of progressing a show, making it maintain certain standards and certain productions. Running a theme park's a tough business.
I can
Very
imagine,
tough business.
and tough to get into for sure. I've tried. I went to school for engineering and applied multiple times, but yeah, it's just everyone's wanting to get in. I work in utilities right now, and it's a good career, but yeah.
You work in utilities as an engineer, you're also probably making more than the guys are making at Disney. But
Probably.
Universal
Yeah,
Studios.
like electric utility, power utility. So definitely a lot of good business, improving the grid around Florida. But yeah, glad to hear about this extensive resume you got. Great deal of knowledge and experience here. Disneyland is still my bucket list. For visiting. I'm planning on going next year, so hopefully that trip goes through, and then I can experience that Knott's Berry Farm and just most of SoCal that I can when I'm there. So I'm pretty excited for that.
A young man to be forming a bucket
you gotta
list.
go see that park.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you gotta see it. And as I said before, you gotta visit Universal Hollywood too. You gotta see the difference between the two versions.
Yeah. Those are night and day. As part of, I was in California for a little bit during Men in Black, and that park out there it's weird almost because it's almost like not even a park because of the way it's the way it's spaced out and everything. It's a studio.
Right. They never intended to build a theme park. It was not intended. It was the studio tour was the thing that was there. There's the tram ride. I went there on one of in the 60s, one trip to my folks, and they had the tram tour, and there was a Wild West stunt show, and that was pretty much about it. A couple of restaurants and shops, and that was it. And there wasn't it wasn't a gated theme park as I recall. You bought a ticket to go on the tram tour, and I think the stunt show was free. I think
might have been.
Best I recall. It was just kind of like set up like a roadside attraction almost.
Yes.
All right, Kurt, why don't you go ahead and ask Tim something here?
Yeah. Well, I certainly like to dive into a nice topic about what it takes to build a gate crasher. I mean, I can think there's a number of things. The first thing that comes to my mind is lots and lots and lots of money, right?
Budget.
So I guess that's sort of a question: is it possible to build a gate crasher for under $1 million?
For under $1 million?
I'm just picking a random number there. I mean, do all gate crashers have
I don't think
I
don't think it's possible for a contractor and a theme park owner to have a conversation for less than $1 million. I will tell you, one of the projects that I did work on was Pandora, And I remember, I'm going to see if I can do this. I remember a construction person a guy in construction, was a construction manager who I have an eminent amount of respect for. And we were standing on the site, and it was probably about 65% done. And he points up to the floating mountains, and he says, "Tell me, how do you estimate the cost of that? How do you estimate the cost of building that?" And the answer is you can't. You can estimate it. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, but to come to a precise a dollar figure, it can't be done. And the other thing that people have to understand when it comes to cost is over the last 2 years, the cost to construct something has pretty much doubled.
Oh,
I
I'll
mean,
bet.
it's pretty much doubled. And when we have, armchair Imagineers saying they could do this, they could do that, they could do this, it's an enormous cost. An enormous cost. And it's B with a billions. It's B for billions. As opposed to millions if you're talking about building something. But we use the term gate crasher, one that really has an impact on attendance. That's kind of a squirrely thing right now. When you have theme parks right now where people are lining up 2-3 hours for a Figment popcorn bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And God bless them. I mean, if this is what, and a lot of them are those legacy guests, I guess that's what they're calling them now. The same people, the people who will come to Disney and pose in front of a purple wall, like they
Right.
do at Magic Kingdom.
Yeah.
And that is something that may not be that hard to accomplish. So when the question, what do you do to develop a gate crasher? Well, first of all, some of those things take a life of their own without any help. But if Disney or Universal opens a new attraction, regardless of the scale of it, they're going to see a positive impact because they have their enthusiasts, they have their fans, and they're going to come see it. Regardless of what some people might think of the attraction, because obviously everybody has their own opinions and tastes. I know, for example, I mean, is there anybody here who doubts the fact that when Future World, or whatever they call it, I forget what the names of the areas are now, is finished, and the Moana attraction's there, and the trees are there, and the landscaping's there, and the fresh paint is there, and the new lights are there, etc. Is there any doubt the park's going to be flooded with people who want to come see it? And certainly it is. Even small additions to some of these parks will always have an impact on attendance in a positive way.
It's one of the reasons why I try not to give Universal a hard time about Fast and Furious being a simulator ride, because when you think about the idea of there being a street racing ride, that takes up a lot of space.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I've seen. Make fun of Daytona 500 all you want, but there's a reason why they're racing in a circle. Okay, I'm sorry. So the fact that it's a simulator ride, I can't really blame them for that. I mean, if you're going to try to do something that's street racing, you're going to need a lot more space than that.
Yeah, it depends how you want to do it.
Yeah, bit of a shame though, because if they would have just made that last section of the ride longer, probably be better.
Yeah, but
anyway,
I do have a question if you don't mind me butting in real quick.
Sure, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so just thinking about the process from start to finish. Like how often have you seen, things that end up on the drawing board just like never really make it out? And I guess the biggest reason for that just mainly budget, or just it sounds good on paper, but the execution of it is just too fantastical that it can't be done. I'm just very curious.
What gets something cut out of a blue sky position, out of a blue sky?
Blue sky, yeah.
As it transitions from a blue sky concept into something, into reality. What causes that to happen can be a whole bunch of different things. It can be the feasibility of the technology. It can be cost. It can be whether or not it detracts from the attraction, or whether or not it's even necessary. I've been in attractions where they're building it and they're a good ways through it, let's say 40-50%, and they think of a new effect or a new gag, a substantial one, not simply just let's switch out some lights and stuff, but like a substantial one. And they look at it and they examine it, and then they say, maybe more trouble than it's worth. maybe the tech in our heads look great, but looking at it now, it looks kind of cheesy. There's a whole bunch of different reasons, and cost is one of them. Cost is certainly one of them. People have to realize that while attractions are being built, and effects are being considered, and budgets are being analyzed, part of those budgets are also because of core trade work, meaning suddenly the air conditioning system to work effectively inside the ride is going to cost more. And so it's not terribly sexy, but that's where they have to cut in order to accommodate those types of things. Another big one, especially in dark rides, is acoustics inside the building. If you can't control where the sound is bouncing, it can really undermine things. But what I like, speaking specifically to what kind of Justin was saying about how they could do something, was what I like about Universal, specifically with regards to Fast and Furious, is I love how Universal always swings for the fence. They always seem to, can we make a tornado and put it inside a building?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we make a convincing tornado and put it inside a building?
Mm-hmm.
And this is before things got real CG and before things got real screen and all that other stuff. Because when you ask that question, the answer is always, of course you can't. But guess what? We're going to try and do it anyway. And Twister had some charm. I mean, I went on it probably about a half dozen times and that sort of thing. But
oh yeah, I love that track. Yeah, I got a kick out of that.
It was a little bit corny at times. That cow flying by. I get it was supposed to be a sign. I'm not supposed to really.
That was a good joke. I took it as a joke.
Yeah, exactly. And I like when they do that. I liked when they swing for the fence like that. And even if it falls short, there's another one that they kind of did that, and it's escaping my mind. But Fast and Furious, what the hell? Let's go for it. There's and sometimes it works, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. And what's really kind of funny about that, now that I think about it, and I know Justin's going to agree with me, is, well, they do that and swing for the fence and say, let's just go for it, which is great. Some of my favorite things about Universal are the simplest ones. The Monster Makeup Show stands out really big with me, and it's so simple, and it's so irreverent, and it's so entertaining. More so than this, sometimes the technologies. A couple things that Universal does that they tried that didn't quite work out quite as well. I'll give you a couple examples.
Mm-hmm.
In Hogsmeade, in the restrooms, they have the moaning Myrtle ghost. Mm-hmm. We're aware of that, right?
Yeah.
Where you go into the restrooms and the ghost moaning Myrtle's in there. Well, they also, had hand dryers. And the sound of the hand dryers when guys were drying their hands would drown out moaning Myrtle's voice.
True.
Yeah, it is hard to hear.
And then the other one is in Gringotts, there's the hallway you go down, and behind the frosted glass windows, there are the shadows of goblins and whoever else speaking. And the ambient sound of chatter of people in the queue area drowns out the sound of what these guys are talking about.
Yeah, I hardly noticed that too.
That's a good point.
And it's those are the kind of things that when you're in a theme park design, they look great on paper and that sort of thing, but you got to kind of account for certain of that stuff.
And there was also in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I'm not knocking Universal. I mean, because again, let's try and do something. Let's swing for the fence on it.
What I was going to say was the fact that when the ride first opened, they had the whole picture taken thing during the queue rather than on the ride.
Okay.
They kind of did away with that.
Yeah.
They just slowed down the queue and just realized, this is the lines are still long for Gringotts already, and that just didn't really help for it. So there's a lot of odd design decisions, but also a lot of great things in there, like the whole bank atrium is marvelous. You can see things moving and you feel immersed. It's a great first opening scene of the queue. I like the little elevator sequence in there. It's just, but yeah, like other little things in there, it's just annoyance or just things you miss. So no, I think it's safe to say not a single attraction out there is completely perfect. There's like some oversights and flaws. We're human. Things get cut out. But I'm certainly curious on the term gatecrasher. Like, gatecrashers of the past, what you consider a gatecrasher now. I'm not sure if we want to dive into that a little bit or if we want to continue on last train of thought, but let's maybe get that.
No, go ahead.
What is considered a gatecrasher, and let's note off some examples and see if we agree or not.
Well, what I'd call a gate crasher is anything that's going to be an attraction that's going to bring in an amount of attendance it's greatly excessive than the normal rate of attendance, say, during that particular time of year. Examples of gate crashes are probably easier to say than in some kind of explanation.
Okay.
Rise of the Resistance is a gate crasher, without question.
Yeah, yeah.
To a degree, Hagrid's is a gate crasher because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Hagrid's was the first attraction that used a virtual queue. I'm pretty sure it was, because I think Hagrid's. I don't know. Did Hagrid's? I think Hagrid's opened before Rise of the Resistance. I don't have Wikipedia in
Yes,
front
it
of me.
did.
So,
I think it
Okay,
opened
yeah.
early that year.
And I think that Hagrid's might have been the first one to use a virtual queue, because I know Rise of the Resistance did. Those I consider gate crashes.
I don't miss those days.
Yeah.
And I know that, and the reason why I know that all of a sudden is because Mr. Chapek said something along the lines, because when Hagrid's first opened, they had the huge long wait lines, and Mr. Chapek said something in an interview like, "We don't consider a long wait line of 10 hours to be a successful attraction. We don't, or be a benchmark for success or a measurement of success." And then Rise of the Resistance opened, and they went into the virtual queue there. So I consider Rise of the Resistance definitely a gate crasher. I consider Cosmic Rewind probably to be a gate crasher, although so many things were opening up at Epcot. It could be a combination of things, not just one attraction. And Epcot always has the festivals, which can also kind of skew whether or not it's a single attraction. I think Tron will be a gate crasher without question.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely will be.
It's gonna be the fastest
and the
coaster on
thing about
property.
it is,
So I'll give you my little definition of a gate crasher. In my experience going to parks, I pick any ride that when rope drop occurs, people make a beeline for that ride, where the entire crowd of people waiting at the gate go to that ride. That's a gate crasher.
I think it is. I think that I think it is. I think it has to be acknowledged that sometimes those things are a temporary status because people want to just try the new big thing.
Yes.
Because an example of that was the Frozen ride that at Norway at Epcot. Because when that thing first opened up, people would sprint. They would bolt to get out to there, and that was quite a run too.
And in addition to that, it doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't necessarily have to be a new ride. For many years, when I went to Disneyland in the 90s, the gate crasher was Space Mountain, which had been there since '77. But when rope drop occurred, I mean, it was the best e-ticket ride in the park during that ticket. It was pretty much that, maybe Star Tours. But everybody would go to, at rope drop, would go to Space Mountain. The entire line of people on Main Street, whoop, off to Tomorrowland and Space Mountain. Of course, that changed. When the Indiana Jones ride opened, everybody would go there. That was the gate crasher. That's the one that had a 1 to 2 hour wait all the time. And they had a hell of a time. We could talk about the stories of the queue management for that ride. That queue went all over the place in Disneyland.
And it's funny you say that, because those two attractions are on opposite ends of the park, kind of. One is going west, one is going east. That's definitely interesting.
So I just brought up the Space Mountain. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new ride. It's just whatever ride resonates with the audience, basically.
I'm sure
for a long time that was Space Mountain.
I'm sure Forbidden Journey, it gets long wait times every day.
There's a peak for it, but there's definitely it'll get between the 20s and 30s, like early in the morning or late at night. Whereas Hagrid's is like full from beginning to close, basically.
Okay.
And Velocicoaster too.
Now, have you seen any gate crashers at these regional parks? Kurt's a big fan of regional parks, and obviously they don't have the budget as, say, Universal or Disney does, but they can still turn out good products.
Yep, absolutely. I got this is my Millennium Force shirt here.
Yeah, it's a fun ride. Oh yeah,
that was a gate crasher. That ride, that was a gate crasher for like 2 or 3 years of the first 2 or 3 years of its operation. You'd be lining up. You line up at the park. They do the rope drop, and boom, everybody's straight for Millennium Force.
That's an excellent example. Regional parks have some fantastic attractions. They don't necessarily have the attendance, and I'm assuming that means in some of these regional parks that their best rides over the course of the day, there are more opportunities to ride them. The attendance comes in, people ride the attraction once, and the people who really came to ride and want to ride multiple times do get a better chance at hitting them. Disney Hollywood Studios, Rise of the Resistance, you're getting on probably once a day.
Yep.
Maybe twice.
Yeah, we actually managed to do it twice.
Lucky you.
Twice.
If it
Painful,
didn't,
but we did it.
yeah, if it didn't break down on you.
Yeah, we got lucky. There were no breakdowns that day. But at least while we were in line.
Kurt, just quick little thing I want to bring up since for your definition of gate crashers. At Hollywood Studios, a lot of people do make a beeline dash to Slinky Dog Dash, but is that really an attraction you consider a gate crasher? I don't think so, in my opinion, but what say you?
I'm kind of with you on that. I'm kind of with you on that. Assuming you're asking me.
Yeah, just everybody.
I think Slinky Dog Dash is a great attraction, but the other way you can define a gate crasher is by saying it's the main reason that you came to the park.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Slinky Dog Dash is on everybody's list, but whether or not it's, the primary objective, I'm not so sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
especially if you're a coaster fan and you got Rock and Roller Coaster in the park and you got other things as well.
I would put visiting Smuggler's Run above Slinky Dog Dash as far as must do's, but that's just my opinion.
I concur.
Yeah. Way different experience. Like Slinky Dog Dash is something you can find in regional parks, even though the theming is nice and it's a pretty fun ride. But yeah, just I think part of a gate crasher is a unique experience that, yeah, like say what you came to the park for. So if it's something you can see derivatives of elsewhere, then is it really something special, or is it just a check mark on your to-do list at a theme park and you just move on and then you'll forget about it like in a year or so?
Yeah. I think that ride is there primarily for the families. I mean, that's a family coaster ride. So
yeah,
I think you can go park by park and you can say what are gate crashers. I mean, I think Magic Kingdom, the gate crasher is going to be Tron. I think at Disney Hollywood Studios, it's Rise.
Yep.
At Epcot right now, it's Cosmic Rewind. Flight of Passage, obviously, Disney Animal Kingdom. If you're going to Islands of Adventure, you had mentioned Hagrid's being so popular, but I'd also put for a select demographic, Velocicoaster, obviously.
Oh yeah.
And Forbidden. Yeah, I see you over there.
It's a wicked ride.
It is. At Universal, it's probably, interestingly enough, Diagon Alley and Gringotts, because I think Diagon Alley is a great example of park as a platform design. And then down the road, well, SeaWorld has so many great coasters, but down the road from that, when Epic opens, it'll be, wow, I have no idea what the gate crash will be at Epic, because there's going to be so many options from at least what we're reading on.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Especially with this this coaster that's supposedly based off the Donkey Kong minecart levels, which are big fan favorites in the video game community.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. But anyway, what would you recommend for these regional parks to do to make their attractions more popular, in your opinion?
It's difficult to say simply because they don't have the resources that the majors have. And like I said, right now, construction is extremely expensive. Coasters, there's the demand for coaster construction. A friend of mine who once told me, and he's very big in design, he's built a theme park attractions around the world, told me that if you go to one of the big coaster manufacturers and you say you want a roller coaster and you start talking budget and some basic conceptuals of that roller coaster, the coaster company's going to say, okay, we'll be out at your job site in a year and a half, 2 years. It's not like the coaster companies are waiting around for someone to come knock on their door and ask them to build a coaster. The demand for roller coasters from Intamin, B&M, what's the other one? The one that begins with a V. Vekoma. Yeah. That these guys are constantly in the process of constructing and designing. And the one person I'm talking about built a park in China, and the coaster company said, here's how much it costs to build. And they asked the designer to go back to the coaster company and try and essentially negotiate it down, telling them, hey, if you can work with us on price. We'll give you more business in the future. We'll give you future business. And the designer didn't do it. He looked back at the owners and said, they don't care about your future business because they've got a long list of people sitting in line behind you right now, ready for them to go to work. So you can take the deal or not take the deal. They really don't care because they've got so many people demanding their work right now. And regional parks, especially when it comes to coasters, regional parks can't necessarily put money in. Regional parks tend to build things pretty quickly, and they can't necessarily put money in and let it sit there waiting for it to be built because they're standing in line for these companies to show up. And you do see a lot of regional parks lean on roller coasters as opposed to IP, dark rides, and other things like that. So, which
Kurt,
gets people through the gate, but it's usually people who are younger and people who don't have a whole lot of disposable income and people who don't bring kids with them. So the amount of money that they're actually dumping into the park is a little bit more limited.
Yeah.
All right, Kurt, why don't you go next?
Yeah, so we should probably, so we talk about money. Obviously, you need lots and lots of money to make a big ride. We should probably talk about story and the need for the story and IP and how much IP matters in making a gate crasher. And, you know, by say IP, basically off existing IP kind of thing. What's your perspective on story and IP?
Well, I'll take that. First, let me talk about story. Again, my first attraction was Men in Black in 1998. And the creative director on that was David Cobb. And I will advocate and I will push back on anybody who disagrees with me on this. I think it's got probably the greatest storyline of any theme park attraction. It's bookended. It's
definitely up there.
It's bookended perfectly. And the idea that it is a World's Fair attraction to when you go in and suddenly you're recruited, which is seamless with the movie because that's how Will Smith is recruited in the movie as a trainee, walking through headquarters, the bulletin board, walking into the immigration room, and going through, and you are a trainee, taking you through that first trainee scene. Then, of course, something goes horribly wrong. The sets are magnificent, etc. And then at the end, when he neuralizes the guests, and then you're in the universe of you again, I think that story is seamless. And that's great. And that's great. I really do wish that somebody would come up with a better storyline than we're going through doing something, then something goes horribly wrong. But that's pretty much 99% of theme park rides. Sometimes it is.
Yeah, it kind of has to. Well, that's a whole nother discussion, man. That kind of like has to be that way. Any story has to have things go wrong.
But the same gentleman, David Cobb, always talks about waiters, swimmers, and divers. And this is also kind of transitions into the IP thing. You have people who are waiters who come in and they're just riding the ride and enjoying the ride. Men in Black. I'm just going through and getting a score and I'm shooting at stuff. You have swimmers who are familiar with the IP and paying a little bit of attention to the story and get the joke with the neuralizer at the end. And then you've got divers who are looking at absolutely every detail on the ride and seeing how it links back to the inside joke or something else from the movie. There's a little pug dog someplace in that ride sitting on a windowsill, which plays to Frank, the pug dog from the movie. There's those types of things. So you talk about waiters, swimmers, and divers when you're doing story like that. As far as IP goes, IP is, it's a marketing device first and foremost because especially if it's a huge movie, and it got to the point where, especially with you hear stories about Harry Potter, and when you saw Hogwarts and you read about Hogwarts, or saw Hogwarts in the movie, it screamed theme park. It absolutely screamed theme park that you knew that it was eventually going to go into the medium. And I will tell you this, and this is an absolute fact: the first time I ever heard Harry Potter mentioned as a possible theme park attraction someplace was in the year 2000.
Whoa! So before the first film? No. That was
first film came out in 2001.
Oh, okay. I thought it came out in the 90s for some reason. No, the book was published, and then the film came out.
Yeah, the book was published, I think, in 96. I'm guessing, but yeah, the first time I distinctly remember hearing conversations about Harry Potter coming to a theme park. or being kicked around. They're being kicked around as a concept.
Whole
Oh yeah,
decade.
I can
Yeah,
see that.
wasn't Spielberg actually working on the Jurassic Park ride at the same time for the movie?
Sure.
Huh?
But that's another. I mean, that's another franchise that screams theme park as well.
Oh yeah,
right?
it's literally a theme park
Yeah.
that you're going
Yeah.
It's
to.
literally a theme park in the park.
That goes horribly wrong and gets
Yeah,
many.
completely wrong, right?
Yes.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
But again, story. I think again you get into that situation where as a designer you're caught up in the story and you say, okay, we're going to tell the story and we're going to tell it like this, and this. But ultimately, you got to realize your audience are people eating popcorn and people who are going souvenir shopping. And so they're not necessarily in the same headspace or context as if they were going to the theater and seeing a play, even though that's kind of what they're doing. They're going to a theater to see a play or to a theater to see a film where they're seated and invested and the story is brought to them. But when you're in a theme park, it's more like I guess you're more active in it. And sometimes you can, if your story becomes too detailed, little things slip by. Doesn't necessarily undermine the value, the quality of the attraction experience, but you can't overthink it all the time because, like I said, waders, swimmers, and divers.
Yeah, as far as IP as well, to wrap up the point, if you take something like as vast as Star Wars and you try to get people who may not be familiar with the franchise or at least where it's going, that's definitely a big obstacle because you have a big pool of lore. What's most recognizable? Like, not everyone's going to go in Smuggler's Run and be like, oh, there's Hondo. Who's Hondo? Like, he's not in the films. He's just part of a really good cartoon series. Really, really good, but that's still a niche audience in compared to the mainstream media. So, just kudos. I mean, every time, even still, like, there's a lot of critics of that attraction. I'll defend it. Like, I enjoy every time I go on Smuggler's Run.
Oh, so do I.
Yeah, like I think it deserves more credit than it gets for its storytelling and its set immersion and the results.
It's really great. It's
Yeah.
really interesting what you just said there because first time I went on Smuggler's Run, looking at the Hondo character and thinking this is really cool, and I'm a Star Wars fan, and you'll love this. This is really cool. Great animated figure, by the way.
Oh,
Great
yeah.
animated figure. And for the moment, at the time, I was reading is it called Black Spire, Black something or other? It's the novel that came out that was based on Batuu. And I thought, and I had just started. I thought maybe this Hondo guy was in the book, or maybe he was just a character created for the ride or something. And now, beginning last September, early part of September, when I work on the treadmill, I've been watching Clone Wars.
Yeah, good on you.
And I'd never seen the series before, and suddenly there he is, and I'm like,
yeah.
You know,
thank you, Filoni.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool actually because it helped me enjoy the attraction a little bit more because I realized that this is not something that Disney just manufactured and stuck into George Lucas's world. It was something that George Lucas had come up with as a character.
Yeah.
So that made that pretty cool. But IP, I think there's two things about it. Number one, there is a marketing thing about it because like I said, you look at Jurassic Park, you look at Star Wars, you look at Potter. Those things make you think theme park. What are the theme park possibilities when you see it? I can tell you right now, I wouldn't have thought the same thing about Guardians of the Galaxy. I love the movies. I think they're great and irreverent. But when I watched them, there was nothing in my head that said, wow, that would make a great theme park attraction. Maybe because the whole science fiction space travel battle was a very broad thing. Star Wars covered it. But I didn't necessarily think it would be a great space attraction. And they ripped off the concept too.
Yeah, well, IP is kind of an interesting thing I found. I always kind of wonder how much it's really required, because I look at things like Six Flags and their attempts where they try to integrate IP. It's kind of hit or miss. It's kind of interesting side note I've noticed they for a while, sometime back, Six Flags bought a license for Thomas the Tank Engine, so they could theme their kids areas, and that seemed to go pretty well. And then they got to the point says, "Oh, we don't want to pay this license anymore," so they took out all the theming and left the rides, and now they're kind of like generic rides.
Oh no!
And it was definitely the case that the number of people in the kids area fell off pretty dramatically. I noticed.
I'm sure.
There.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think particularly for families with kids, I think Because I don't really know if the kids care that much as the parents do. Because the the
Right.
parents are the ones that are paying the money. They want to give their kid an experience. I think the parents are taking there to give their kid that Thomas the Tank Engine experience.
Right.
I don't really
I think
know
that
if the kid notices so much. It's just a generic train ride. I mean,
unless I think that's true. The only time I think the little ones would probably be interested by the IP is in something like character meet and greets or
Yeah,
on stage shows. It's funny because I think one of the best theme park stage show productions ever made was Barney in the Park at Universal Studios.
Really?
Did you guys ever see it?
I
No.
did
Nobody
not.
know?
Wait,
Okay.
A Day in the Park with Barney?
Yes.
Yeah, when I was a kid, way back.
This was what's amazing about it is they have this kind of silly little pre-show, and they walk the kids into this theater in the round, and it's not a very big theater by any means. And this guy who calls himself Mr. Peekaboo was the host.
Yep.
And he comes up on stage and he says, if you want Barney to arrive, he's got to use your imagination. And then all this twinkle music started and these kind of lights, and the lights came down and it was dark except for these kind of little running colored lights running around. And then bam, they go right into the theme. The lights jump up and he's standing there right in front of everybody in the middle of the stage, and it's like a Beatles concert from 1966, and there's the attendants who are standing down by the stage like this, making sure no kids go racing up. But I mean, he pops onto stage out of nowhere, and you look at that and you say, no, I'm not going to go home and start watching Barney videos, because then people in the neighborhood will start writing petitions about me. But I have at least enough respect for the producers who put that effect together. Because it worked. It worked very well. And I think that also, because when he was at the height of that popularity, I think that's one where IP for little ones really would matter. So,
yeah. I think it makes a big impact with the younger audiences for sure.
and if they're younger audiences, it's mom and dad and 2 kids coming in. It's not one guy coming in to ride a roller coaster. It's 4 tickets, not one.
Yep, very true.
And 4 meals, at least 4 meals too.
Cha-ching.
Yeah.
So Justin,
yeah. But it's interesting with the story. When it fails, I don't know if maybe you made up the Busch Gardens Williamsburg for the Curse of Dark Castle. Anybody know that ride?
I just seen a video
Yeah,
of it.
so that was basically it's the same ride system as Spider-Man at Islands of Adventure.
Oh yeah.
They wrote an original story for it, and unfortunately the story kind of sucked. And they actually tore the ride out a couple of years ago. They couldn't justify the maintenance cost on it for the attendance it was pulling in. It was popular. It was very popular at first, of course, because it's a huge, big budget ride that you wouldn't see outside of a Disney or Universal park. But it kind of, as everybody you went through, it's kind of a one and done. You say, well, that story, it was confusing and it didn't really make sense. It was basically, it's like Spider-Man. You go through a bunch of screens. It's 3D, and it's a bunch of 3D gags, basically.
Okay.
They kind of pretend there's a story tying it together, and that's kind of why I want to bring up story, because this is a good example where it flopped. It doesn't. It's not based on any existing IP. It was an original story, and it just kind of, it's almost like somebody was checking the boxes, and not really knowing what they were doing, and that's where it kind of fell.
Definitely not a gate crasher.
Yeah, it was. I think it was briefly a gate crasher, but it had no staying power.
Daniel, why don't you go ahead and ask the next question here?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask something. My mistake.
No, I was trying to kick it over to you, actually.
Oh, okay. So let's see. We talked mainly about IP and originalness. So gatecrashers can also, let's just talk about the trend of themed lands, I suppose, because that's can also be defined as a gatecrasher, and we've seen the success of Potter and Galaxy's Edge and all that stuff coming out, and whatever Epic is planning. But I just want to know if there is as much thought going into the rest of the experience at a theme land as there is in the main, what's supposed to be the attractions holding it together. And I'm not sure how much you worked in, much in that area, but I'm just curious about hear your perspective on that importance, keeping that synergy between attraction and the land itself, and if you really think this is a sustainable future for theme parks, in your opinion.
Well, I think it's sustainable. I think it has to be because I think they've I don't want to say painted themselves into a corner necessarily, but they certainly set a standard for themselves that they have to emulate. And there, if not, the thing is that they'll go blue sky and they'll hint at stuff or they'll unveil stuff, and everything seems to trend in that area.
Yeah, it's
Epic Universe is going to be opening up a whole bunch of lands based on, rumors on the internet and what has been announced. We know that Universal's acknowledged Nintendo, for example, but little else. Disney at D23 talked about the concept of a Encanto and Coco land and a Villains land. And those are entire land developments. Avatar and Pandora, the world of Avatar, huge amounts of money invested. And when you realize this is something that I think should shock anybody, you realize that, as I said, over the last 2 years, the cost to build something doubled. Pandora started serious construction in 2015, late 2014. Yeah, that's almost 10 years ago now. Can anyone imagine how much it would cost to build Pandora right now?
Yeah.
I can't even begin to imagine how much it would cost to build Pandora right now, to build the Valley of Moor and to hide the entire ride building with the cliffs and the waterfalls and everything like that, along with the floating mountains and everything. I can't imagine how much you could cost. I mean, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but you can imagine that Mr. Disney built Disneyland probably for a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you could buy the trash cans for Pandora for a couple $1 million.
Wow. Yeah.
I hate exaggerating, obviously, but
Yeah.
the trend is obviously, if you're talking about the bigs, the trend is obviously building entire lands. And if Disney follows through on what they talked about at D23 with an Encanto and Coco land, and beyond that, a Villains land, and blowing out the northwest side of the Magic Kingdom on the other side of Big Thunder Mountain, that'd be stunning. And
yeah, I always believe that.
Stunning.
Go ahead, Justin.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Oh, I'm just gonna add. I think the Villains is the one that attracted me the most.
Agreed.
Yeah, that has the biggest potential, and I think has the most broadest interest. There was I remember I think it was over 10 years ago now. Disney ran a Villains Night special ticket event at Hollywood Studios. It was like 10 or 15
I remember
years
that.
ago.
I think
and
I
this was
remember
the one
that.
Disney had no idea what was going to happen, and there's so many people showed up they ran out of food.
That's right.
Wow.
That's an absolute. I remember that story.
The restaurants ran out of food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
That shows you how much that concept resonates with people.
Can't have to hear about the villains.
The villains are some of the most interesting characters in the Disney staple. I mean, there's no question about it. My current favorite is Emma Stone as Cruella de Vil is phenomenal. Yeah. But there's a lot that they can be doing with that, especially if they just go Disney villains, because Cruella de Vil, Maleficent, all of them are phenomenal. And I also don't want to undersell the idea of doing a land based on Encanto and Coco, simply because of the idea of Disney designating a fantasy type land. A Day of the Dead dark ride would be amazing.
Agreed.
But doing a fantasy type land, embracing the Latin culture, I mean, it'd be huge. I think both those would be successful, but you got to get enough fuel in the plane to get it off the ground. And at the same time, you always say, I know it's always kind of clumsy and primitive to say, well, Disney has to respond to Epic Universe, or or somebody has to respond back and forth between these parks. And I don't think they think like that, because these are massive capital expenditures and there's a lot of thought that go into them. But
for me,
I could see them doing this. It works real well in the time frame, maybe 2027.
Yeah. What I just noticed when it comes to how important the land is for building a gate crasher, I first really noticed this, and this was a very long time ago, but it was back when Hollywood Studios was called MGM, and they had a playground called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yep.
Uh, because the whole idea was that you wanted to explore. It wasn't enough just to go walk through a queue and get on a ride. You wanted to explore the land. And that's what I first noticed it in for that particular attraction. And it went from that to, much bigger things to like uh, Galaxy's Edge to Harry Potter. It's not enough to just, like I said, just walk through a queue, get on a ride, and get off. You want to actually be in that world.
Now, that concept that you're talking about is a concept that can be problematic, but is the answer to crowds. The concept that you're talking about is called Park as a Platform. And what that means is, as soon as you come, in the case of the Magic Kingdom, as soon as you come out from under the train station onto Main Street, USA, you're on the attraction because of streetmosphere entertainment, because of things happening in the buildings around you. An example of the Muppets in Liberty Square when they had that show where they were up in the windows. There was that sorcerer's card thing that they ran at the Magic Kingdom for a while, where there were that. They did something similar to it over at Epcot with passports. And is there a platypus who's like a secret agent or something like that? I don't remember.
Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah.
That might have been it, yeah. But this concept of Park as a platform, so that when you're walking between attractions, there's something happening around you, some kind of entertainment. They toyed with it at Islands of Adventure on the Marvel island, where they would have suddenly a hero and a villain show up, and they'd battle in the streets around you. And then they'd split, and they'd be there for like 20, 30 seconds, and then they'd be gone. And so as you're moving through the park, you're not in this concept of you're just walking from attraction to attraction to attraction. The concept of Park as a Platform is from the moment you get into the park, you're in the show. And that's kind of always what Disney's tried to do from the very beginning, where Mr. Disney said, we want to create these atmospheres where the people who are cast members are wearing wardrobe in Frontierland that makes them look like they live on the frontier, or in Adventureland makes them look like they're from the South Pacific, and to get richer and more in depth. The difficulty thing about that is the interactivity. How do you do that? How do you maintain it? The labor intensity, the fact that it's a labor intensive approach to entertainment, that's kind of tough. But it's the answer to beating crowds, because you don't necessarily, you're always entertained.
Yeah.
You're always seeing something cool. Character meet and greets are an example of it too. You're always entertained. And that concept is something that hasn't been perfected, but should be explored a little bit more. When you walk through Galaxy's Edge and you are confronted by stormtroopers, stuff along those lines.
It's a little fun.
One of Barbara and my friends who works in entertainment got to be the guy who ran the BB-8 robot running around Galaxy's Edge. And he got to play BB-8 from behind the scenes with his little remote, stuff like that. That I think is cool. That stuff I really like.
Yeah, and that's something that I believe we experienced recently through Halloween Horror Nights here at Universal Orlando. Just the whole, everywhere you go, you're entertained. The Pumpkin Lord, right? Just went to the park. Everyone in scary actor costumes. Like, yeah, like I can imagine the amount of coordination and the budget required to do that, but just imagine a whole theme park with that concept and how phenomenal that would be. Just to maintain it. I'm hoping that's part of the future, because that's the one thing I do enjoy with walking through Galaxy's Edge. Just just seeing a lot of things in character. Even though I do wish there was more, I understand why there isn't and why cuts were made, because it has been documented. There has been cuts for that land, but I can see where Disney was coming from with that, and hopefully in the future, things can be a bit more easier, and we can figure out how to solve these complex problems and really provide an experience year round that captures the spirit of whatever world you're trying to make.
Yeah. Well, as far as Halloween, as far as Halloween Horror Nights goes, keep your fingers crossed if the rumors are true about what one of the lands is going to be at Universal's Epic Universe, which would be Classic Monsters.
Yeah,
look at him over there.
I got them all crossed, because supposedly they were going to paint the land in black, white, and gray. I'm like, okay, that's dedication.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing. That would be pretty remarkable.
Now, Now, how much would you say technology has to go into this? Because obviously, tech is always advancing, and while it's definitely cool, I still think you can possibly do something with minimal tech.
I think you can. When we did the panel on Men in Black, and David was on that panel, it was pointed out that a lot of attractions nowadays begin with technology. But right now things move so quickly. You begin with tech when you're working out a concept, and then you design the ride, and then you redesign the ride, and then you redesign the ride, and then you build the ride, and then you get the bit, then you start testing the ride system, you test the ride system, and time passes. And from the point where you say, we've got tech, let's build a ride base on it, to the point where the first guest enters the queue, the tech at that point is basically 3 years old, if not older, and is obsolete. And the tech is usually a little older than that because the tech has to be tested itself. You're not going to start investing in the design of an attraction if that tech doesn't have some level of reliability from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
And consequently, as a result, that's what happens. The tech becomes obsolete by the time the attraction's open, and it's not quite as cool. That might have been what happened to the Disney Play Pavilion at Epcot. I'm not 100% sure. But that was going to be a lot of interactivity and a lot of technology. I know that. And when the pandemic hit and they paused construction on it to start it up again and pursue it, by the time it was built, that goes from like what? If the original concept was designed, let's say in 2018, and then they open it at Epcot in 2024, that's 6 years. And when you're depending on tech, that could make that obsolete. But tech is very big. There's a resiliency factor too. An example of that is like Men in Black, where if you have tech that's running an effect, that effect has to run every 8-9 seconds. So that's again goes back to reliability of something that's supposed to, be there when the doom buggy rides by it.
Yeah, and tech can also be reused. Like we see that with the trend of trackless dark rides being used around the world. And I'm not sure how old that tech is, but I'm sure it was something developed in the 2010s, and we'll see if future dark rides will continue to feature it. But it seems like a system that certainly gained a lot of popularity is here to stay. Um, and reliable. Even though I know Rise goes down a lot, but that's for different factors, but beyond the ride system, because I've seen videos about that ride. There's just there's way too much going on. I honestly don't know how the Imagineers managed to really put a lot of fail safes and checks and QC and just everything that goes in to make sure, hey, if something's not working, they can detect it, they can shut it down, and can just move on and fix it because it's complex, man.
That is, they're complicated machines, and they run 8 hours straight. One of the best comparisons as far as theme park models go that I ever read was running a theme park is like running an airlines, because it's guest services centric. You are operating big machines. The quality of guest service is based upon how those machines work, and if they don't work, suddenly the guest service is down the tubes, and you're constantly inspecting, you're constantly maintaining, and it's incredible. The theme parks are incredibly labor intensive. You need a lot of people to run a theme park, just like you do need a lot of people to run an airline. And I think that's a favorable comparison, running an airline and running a theme park.
All right, Kurt, why don't you go ahead and go next?
Yeah, I think I'd like to expand more on tech. There's a couple of different aspects of this. I guess one thing I'd like to talk about, if you have any experience of things that they wanted to do that were not physically possible, like the one that I always remember reading about a long time ago is when Walt Disney conceived Matterhorn Mountain. He apparently said he wanted it to run on real snow in Los Angeles.
Oh man!
And so his
imaginary had
to come back and says, "Gee, Walt, I don't think we can do that." But so I'm curious about things like that. Have you gotten people give you blue sky stuff that says, "Yeah, we can't really build that"?
I don't know if this has ever been done before, after, but back in like 2005, there was a thought about a coaster or it might be like a theme coaster, dark ride type thing, where the ride would transition from a track beneath the coaster to a suspended track coaster.
Oh wow.
Okay,
Hmm.
so
Wow.
it would be riding on the base, and then when I don't know, when it got to the top of the hill, it would somehow latch onto a coaster above, and suddenly everything drops out below you. And I'm gonna kind of backtrack a little bit on that. That might not have been a coaster; it could have been a dark ride.
Yeah.
Um, a little bit like that. I believe the Peter Pan ride at Magic Kingdom is always suspended, but it looks kind of like it comes off. It's steered into the attraction by a track at the bottom. But then when you go through the bedroom window, suddenly you are suspended on a suspended track. That might be, but I thought I read something about that and that it was rejected. That could have been because of cost as much as feasibility, or they could have just come up with a better idea instead of doing something else. I don't know, effects that don't work, obviously they try them and they build them, but if they don't work, maybe sometimes that happens. But I'm
You mean
not
like
really
the Yeti?
like what?
Mean
George,
like the Yeti?
did anybody here ever see the Yeti work?
Yeah,
I
No,
I've
I
seen it
remember
never
work.
did.
once. Well,
Yeah, I
not in that
saw it
ride.
working.
In
And
Everest, my bad.
in Joe Rody's defense, when that thing worked, it was awesome. It was
It was
really
cool.
awesome.
It was cool.
The idea that they have to take down like a third of the mountain in order to fix it, we might be stuck with
Strobe
a
It's a
lights.
real drag.
yeah,
Real
a
drag
disco
too, because
Yeti.
I would love to see it fully operative and in motion.
It is, it
Got-
is.
It was
And
good.
to Disney's credit, they've made some animated figures that I think are very underrated because you never hear people really talk about them that much. The shaman in the Navi River journey is stunning.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The publicity said on the evening or the meeting Mr. Lincoln at Disneyland had like 18 servos in the entire body, 18 of the little motors in the entire body. And I know that the shaman has like 55 in the head and neck alone.
Oh God.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that is an incredibly complicated machine. And I know that it's inspected probably nightly because a lot of this equipment and ride systems have warranties on them. But in order for Disney to maintain those warranties for the designers and the companies that build to come in and fix, they have to do regular inspections and they have to run regular cycles on them. And they have to do regular replacements and pieces on that. And that figure is so beautiful and so remarkable. But then there's the Yeti.
Yeah. I believe
Yeah.
part of design is also future proofing, just talking from the engineer standpoint. And unfortunately, I've been aware of rides, especially Universal, that where the manufacturer who did the ride systems just no longer exists. So if they wanted to bring the bring the ride up to its original operational potential, they just can't. Cat in the Hat, Men in Black, they're stuck, and it sucks because those rides used to be really good and really effective. And now it's just, well, Men in Black's still good, but it's like it could be even more. It could be function the way it should be because it's aging and it sucks because there's so much love and stuff put on that ride, but there's just these obstacles that they can't overcome without a full reimagining of the ride. So I guess for gate crashers, like because there's been some rides at Disney World. It's been what 50, 40 years now, and they're still running.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Crazy how they're able to do it then, but nowadays it's harder to do that. So how do you foresee future attractions kind of overcome this problem? Like it's just like a roll of the dice inevitability, or were just things just that simpler back then, or were
Well,
people
I'll give you the obvious answer, but you won't like it.
sure?
Screens.
Yeah.
Great future
I'm
proofs, yeah.
sorry, but I just, I gotta believe that when they do make films for theme park attractions, they probably make extra footage, not of the same sequence, but extra footage so they can change things up a little bit. And I don't blame them for it because look, for all the complaints people get about screens.
Mhm.
Fact of the matter is if you didn't have them, a lot of experiences wouldn't exist. Flight of Passage comes to mind immediately.
Oh yeah.
Gringotts comes to mind immediately. It also allows
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man,
Spider-Man.
absolutely. Boom. Godfather, absolutely. That's how you come about that. I don't think anybody will ever build an attraction like Men in Black again for exactly what you were saying.
Yeah.
You're talking about pneumatic effects, right? You're talking about pumping air, because I think they're largely all pneumatic with the exception of those two ambush aliens, which are magnificent. They sit on the platforms when the two cars divide and go down two different alleys,
Yeah.
and the one that rises up, I think
Yeah.
that one's hydraulic, and it's gorgeous. I think. But you're right. I mean, even with the pneumatic ones, air leaks, air pressure, air finds a way out. And over time, when the figure came up to here, and after a little bit of time, it's only coming up to here. And when you have so many figures, and you have to inspect them, and you have to inspect them, and inspect them, again, labor intensive, costs money. So, but
Even
it's
Haunted
that's
Mansion lost
the
some
answer.
effects, right? Like I remember some effects not working as much recently. So even a
Yeah,
classic like that's not immune, and that makes me sad.
right.
It's like I want them to last, but they just can't. Age, father time is undefeated.
They do, and they're expensive. It's expensive to maintain these things, and there's certainly no warranties available on Haunted Mansion. Not anymore. But
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole.
screens is the way it goes. The other is gravity. I mean,
Mm.
but those are just track rides like that. But,
Yeah. Well, screens are not. I mean, I wouldn't say screens are inherently bad. It's only when they're the sole thing. I mean, Spider-Man is a great example of how screens can be used perfectly. That's
Sure.
a great ride.
It's a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's kind of like the saying that I use called "use it, don't abuse it." You could definitely use screens, but you might want to do something to kind of mix it up a little bit.
Sure.
And Daniel, why don't you go ahead and go with the next question here?
I'm starting around of a couple, but yeah, actually, Kurt, do you have one? I'm still just debating on what else to ask. I think
Sure.
we
Oh,
covered.
actually, I can continue on the technology thread that we're talking about here. I mean, I'd like to get your perspective on how important you think like advanced technology really is. Like, I'm a real geek when it comes to the engineering and stuff. And I remember the first time I rode Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, I could not believe what was going on in that ride. Because I'd seen roller coasters before, but I'd never seen them moving on a track and have like 100 and some odd of them moving in sequence at the same time.
As an
I was like,
omnimover, yeah.
holy shit! Somebody actually built something like this. And
The
I was wondering
idea-
just from.
You wonder who the mad genius was who decided that let's suspend it. Let's turn the roller coaster over and suspend it from a track above, which is what it is. So if you're suspended on it, as opposed to the base being at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
That approach. And I could tell a story, and when this thing's done recording, I will tell a story to you guys, but I'm not going to tell it like this right now while it's being recorded. Okay.
Fair enough. That's fair enough.
I can't afford the attorney, but that's a salient point. The idea that they took that KUKA arm and did what they did with it, and that's pretty remarkable. And what's really kind of cool about that is that's engineering as opposed to tech. When I think of tech, I think of something probably computer based, and obviously that's hooked up to some sort of computer system that runs the ride system. But but the idea that they took that engineered, constructed device, and not only could it was an attraction to begin with, because at IAPA they had one on the floor, and that's the first time I'd ever seen one, and everybody got a chance to ride it. But the idea to put it onto an omnimover or a track system of some kind, and then run it through a dark ride like that's just genius.
It was. Yeah.
And it worked.
And
it worked pretty well.
And how important would you say it is to adapt things like that to make something a gatecrasher like the Harry Potter ride is?
Well, I think that they I think that it's very important to be able to think away from the 3D and away from the holograms. And I had the privilege of walking Galaxy's Edge and seeing the underneath what it looks like underneath Smuggler's Run, and
Oh, geez.
it's crazy. It's crazy. It was amazing to see what was underneath there, the hardware, uh, and that's using that's using hardware as opposed to the tech end of things, because this is real steel, and that's pretty cool underneath there. I can't imagine what it looks like underneath Rise of the Resistance. But if you you look at that, you understand why once in a while they break down, because it's crazy how much how much is in there. And what's also interesting is Cosmic Rewind is a little less of that, because it's not a platform that's moving all over the place. And Cosmic Rewind is got a reputation of being a workhorse. It doesn't break down. You're not hearing stories online about it breaking down on a regular basis. Bob Niles on Theme Park Insider, when he was there for Media Day, said they turned the switch on and it never stopped all day. For a brand new attraction, that's a pretty impressive track record.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And hear a lot of great things about that ride. But I guess one of the closing questions I want to think about, Gate Crashers, is just the memorability factor. So just kind of everything that we discussed, the story, the tech, the overall immersion. Like, what is the most critical element when it comes to designing these things? Because it's really hard to predict how people's taste might change over time, or how a piece of tech may look good in blue sky, but then execution wise may not come out as well. So um, the biggest thing that you'd emphasize to a design team, what will be that to ensure memorability in your mind?
Well, I like, first of all, if you're talking about IP, you want to have a familiarity with it, and you want the IP to have a warmth about it. You want the characters to be somebody that there's sympathy for, there's empathy for, that they care about. My complaint about Cosmic Rewind, which is a hell of an attraction, no question about it, is that it's a bit awkward in terms of its theming, because you got a space ride next to a space ride next to a space restaurant.
Yeah.
But I prefer something that has a warmth to it. For me, like the Jungle Cruise, which is one of the traditional Disney rides, it has a warmth to it, but it doesn't necessarily have a big story. It certainly doesn't have tech. It's a boat that's with two wheels that are in a trough below the river, and that's the tech to make that boat ride around the track.
Yeah.
But I just think that that's an important thing, because tech can go cold. Tech can run cold. And again, like I said, as far as story goes, which draws somebody into the experience, that story has to take into account waders, swimmers, and divers. IP helps a little bit with that, because telling a story from start, I mean, I would say what is probably obviously one of the greatest attractions of all time is Haunted Mansion. And the Haunted Mansion has a story, and that story was told by the attraction when it opened. And there is a richness, there's a romance to that story about the bride. And we got a great print, and we saw the original. Actually, the original was on sale for I think $17,000 at Epcot during the Arts Festival. And it's this picture of the Haunted Mansion in its heyday, and the streets in front of the house are all filled with like horse-drawn carriages, and the gas lamps are all on, and there's hustle and bustle and people in top hats back in this Victorian type thing. And it's when it's still alive in that. And in the foreground of the picture, facing the Haunted Mansion and standing there, is the woman who becomes the bride as she's arriving at the house for the first time. And this was painted obviously recently for all practical purposes. But when you see it and you know the story from Haunted Mansion, you realize who it is. You realize what point in the story it is just by looking at it. And you realize that this attraction told a story that didn't exist before they built the attraction.
Right.
And that's just artistic. I mean, by any sense of the word, that is an artistic expression and a real tribute to the designers of the ride. So I would say that I've got, it's a theme park.
Right.
It's a production. It's an entertainment production as much as any movie, play, or story. And that warmth and that level of romance, that for me, that's what's critical.
Mm.
So
Now, obviously, safety is a big, huge factor when it comes to rides. But how do you make it so that the safety doesn't interfere with the ride? Because I think some people kind of see a lot of these safety precautions as a nuisance, but obviously you want them to still feel the world even though they have all this gear on.
illuminated exit signs are the bane to any theme park and designer.
Oh yeah.
We know that. Well, it's paramount. I mean, it's obviously paramount. You think about, I think about us. First job I ever did was Jungle Cruise skipper, and the way the guys would ride the boats. My last day as a Jungle Cruise skipper, they pushed me off the dock in front of the crowds, splashed, big old pratfall.
Oh my goodness!
No way that happens. No way that happens again. Safety. I think safety. First of all, I want to say something here, Justin. When you get onto like a Velocicoaster, and they put you and they strap you in, or any coaster really, I think that adds to the excitement. I think it adds to the anticipation in the build. That is this coaster really going to be so rocking that I got to be strapped down like I'm about to get launched to the moon?
Yeah.
So I think that plays into it to a certain degree. And I don't hear a lot of disagreement out there on that. So I really think it does. I don't know that I don't know that I've ever heard of safety per se being an intrusion on the story or the ride or the experience. Not that I'm aware.
Well, if you recall, if you recall, I had you watch a documentary about a park that Kurt used to go to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You're going here. Safety.
I watched that, and I've been thinking about that, and I knew you were going to bring it up, and I was thinking about what I'd say about that. That, first of all, that obviously is an outlier, and that's insane. But I thought that story was not as much about park safety, but more about local government corruption and graft, because that guy who ran that park obviously greased the palms of every city official and every local sheriff.
Sleazy guy. Absolutely.
Because I mean, one parent goes to the police department and reports what's going on up there. All they'd have to do is raid it one time, and today it would never happen. I can't believe it would ever happen.
Especially the Cannonball Loop. I can't believe someone made that.
That was crazy. That was crazy.
Yeah, that was and that, as I said before, that was operating on one of my visits there. I actually saw people go through that. I didn't go through that because I'm not insane.
Well, Justin, since we were talking about the safety, I guess one thing we overlook is just the amount of something this budget is all the cameras. They're watching it all the time, so that's an added factor of like, hey, if someone's doing something dumb, I mean, you're going to be that person called out over the mic, like, hey, sit down or do something. And yeah, like, remember that tour we went of Jimmy Fallon's ride? Like, we saw the security, and there's people out there.
Yeah.
So I mean, I never feel unsafe going on a ride like that at big theme parks. It doesn't detract from the experience. You don't see most of the time you don't see the cameras. It's just more the restraints, which depending on your body type can be a hindrance. You know, unfortunately, to all the overweight people on some of the Potter rides, it's like rip, they can't get on them. But that's the way they're designed. Like, just if the train's too heavy, it's not going to be able to perform all its necessary show functions, and you don't have the experience to accommodate a small portion of the population. So,
sure.
How do you feel about a ride like Kong or Skull Island, the Kong ride, where there really isn't any safety restraints?
I don't ever like to rip on any real ride. I don't like to say a ride's bad necessarily. It's not my favorite ride, I will tell you this. I think you have to almost not restrain people, because when you go through that tunnel with the film on either side of you, if you really want to see what's going on, you have to slide your butt around that bunch a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that as a safety measure doesn't bother me too much. as somebody who was an operator in Confrontation, I don't recall there being restraints on that.
No.
And there's a point where the Kong figure, which was just so cool, would hit the top of the Staten Island, whatever, the tramway, and then it would swing down and it would drop a good 20 feet or so. But I will say two things. First of all, when on Confrontation, I don't know if ever you guys ever got on it, but
I rode it, yeah.
When I was an operator on it, you're right up front and you're standing. So I'm not in any restraint, but you're right up front and standing. And when you come around the corner and you see the Kong figure hanging off the Brooklyn Bridge like that, hanging off the side of the Brooklyn Bridge, it's every time it got me. It's stunning. And regarding Kong and Skull Island, when they go from the film to the puppet at the end, seeing Kong at the end of that ride is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. It is so impressive.
Scared
and I
me
give
as a
them
kid.
props for that. Yeah, it's so impressive. It's so impressive. So that's as far as safety goes.
All right, Kurt, why don't you actually finish this off here with one more question?
Yeah, sure. I got one more I'd like to ask. This is kind of more of a vague question, but let's see where we go with it. Is there, I would call a secret sauce for a ride? Because like I look at a ride that's really successful, that as soon as the moment you get off, you want to immediately get back in line again and go on it again. And that can be true with roller coasters, like Millennium Force is definitely that way, has no story, no theming whatsoever. It's just was the world's first 300-foot roller coaster, and it was a really good one. But then Haunted Mansion is one. I always want to ride that one again. Sure. And the Harry Potter rides, of course, I want to get right back on again. Lots of rides like this. So is there like a secret sauce to leaving the guest with this feeling that I got to get on this ride again?
I don't think it's one single item. I think it depends on a couple of things, and it starts up here and then it kind of funnels down. First of all, what kind of attraction it is. Productions are, let's say, a coaster, dark ride, or something along those, or film, like some of the films at Epcot. Impressions de France is one of my favorites to sit in and watch.
Yeah, excellent.
Or The American Adventure, also another.
Yeah, that's underrated. I know it.
Right. Thank you. You're right. You're absolutely right. And that's one that's been around for 40 years. So I think it depends on the platform as far as that goes. But secret sauce, nowadays it seems like it is IP. I would also say area development around an attraction has a big deal to do with it. Like Pandora would be some of it, but I don't think that there's necessarily a magic bullet. I think it depends on the story you're telling. I think it depends on the ride system, the type of ride, and the audience that you're also trying to attract. Velocicoaster is amazing, but it's a fairly narrow demographic. I ain't getting on it. But
my parents, they tried it once and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not going on it again."
It's an aggressive attraction. I might get on it. I don't know.
My uncle.
I've been on way more aggressive roller coasters than that one.
I took my mom, my aunt, and uncle on the Hagrid coaster just because my mom, she doesn't do roller coasters at all. But she saw the ride on footage and thought, okay, maybe I think I can handle this. And my aunt and uncle don't do roller coasters either. But we get on, we go on the ride. She goes, I'm glad I did it, but I'm not going to do it again. And my aunt and uncle felt the same way. And then suddenly, they come back into town. The Velocicoaster's open. I'm taking my cousins on there, and then my uncle just joins us out of nowhere. I'm like, wait a minute. You can handle Velocicoaster because he loved that, but you can't handle the Hagrid coaster.
Yeah.
Like, there goes logic out the window.
Unless he doesn't like the back, because there's a backwards part on the Hagrid coaster, right? And then there's that drop in the Hagrid's coaster in the room and stuff. But in any case, teach his own. But I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and if you ever want to have me back sometime down the road, I'd love to talk to you some more.
Absolutely. It was really great having you on. It's been a really educational experience, actually, and knowing more about your background and all the things that you've done in this industry. And absolutely, we would love to have you back on at some point. Well, so until then, everyone, thanks for joining us. Thanks to Tim Bernardi for joining us. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.